Okay, so what we have here is we have a animation. So a fish that was rigged and then duplicated for each frame of his cycle. So you can see if we just solo this guy, right? So this was the beginning of the animation. If we come all the way back down to this one, we can see that that's kind of like back at the end of the loop. So 65 and 61 are actually pretty similar. Okay, so and then with all these between, so that's essentially what this is, like a walk cycle or something like that, where each frame, the geometry for that cycle was duplicated, and we have an actual geometry reference of that. Okay, so moving on. So that's basically what this is. So we've got 65 frames, or 65 geometry references of that cycle. Okay, so what we want to do, let's just go ahead and group all of this. Fish group. Okay, so we want to create a particle system where we can emit our fish from and have them swim around. So first thing to do is we want to change this to effects up here in the left hand corner, and we're going to go to in particles, and we are going to create an emitter. Okay, over here in our emitter 1 tab, we have our emitter type, and so we've looked at that a little bit. For this instance, I want to change this to a volume. Okay, so everything inside of this volume is where the particles will be emitted from. This is a little bit small, so we're going to scale that up. And you can actually see as I scale it up here in the transform attributes for the emitter, we can see what's going on over there. So I'm just going to scale it up, something like that. Okay, so now we have this emitter that is going to fill up with particles, and I'm going to hide this group just for a minute. So now if we play through that, we'll see that we have particles emitting from within this. Okay, so first off, I don't want the fish falling, so let's turn our gravity off. So I'm going to click on nucleus, and I'm going to come down to gravity, and I'm going to change that to 0. Okay, so the next thing I want to do, let's go to our emitter, and I want some more fish. So I'm going to change that to 1,000, and I'm just going to play this forward down here by 1 frame. So go to frame 2, and so that looks okay, just to get a few fish in there. So over here on rates, particles per sec, I'm just going to right click on that, set key, step forward 1 more frame, and we're actually going to put that at 0, and set key. Okay, that way, as we step forward now, we'll just see we give birth to these particles, and yeah, and we don't get any more after that. Okay, so you can see a little bit of movement. That's just to our away from center here, and that's okay for right now. I do kind of like that because that's going to help us visualize some things. Okay, so now that we have that sorted, what we want to do now is let's open up this fish group, and I just again, you hide by hitting H, right? So I've got that off. Okay, so I just want to click fish 1, scale all the way down to where I can see fish 65, and I'm going to shift click that, and that'll give me all of those. So that's great. Then I'm going to hold control down, so not shift now. So now I'm going to hold control down, and I'm going to click the in particle 1. Okay. All right, so up here in the in particles tab, if I open that up, I have this instancer, and so that's basically going to copy the fish through an instance to each of the particles. So I'm going to go ahead and click that, and as I play through now, we get these fish attached to the particle. Okay, I'm going to shrink some of this up. Okay, so the next thing we want to look at is we want to look at some of our instance attributes. And so if I go to InParticle, if I select InParticle and I go to our InParticle Shape 1 tab, if I come down here to our Instancer tab, okay, so this is our Instancer, which controls some attributes and things like that for our instance geometry that is attached to our particles. Okay, so let's take a look at some of this. So the first thing I want to do is if I come down here, okay, and I'm looking through here, and if I see aim direction, what I want to do is I want to click on that, and I want to change our aim direction to our velocity. Okay, and so if you remember, our particles are actually moving away from the center, and so now you can see that our particles are, or our instance geometry is now facing the direction that we're moving, except in this situation our particles are actually, or our instance geometry is actually backwards, but essentially we can see that it's working. We've got, you know, the tails facing the direction that we're moving. Okay. Okay, so that's pretty good. Okay, one thing I noticed is before we move on and fix velocity, I noticed that we don't have our actual animation happening. So let's come over here and we'll see Instancer 1. Let's click on Instancer 1. Okay. And we should get Instancer 1 up here in our tab over here. So looking at this, again, making sure that I'm in my attribute editor here all the way to the right. I just want to change the cycle from none to sequential. Now as I play through this, we'll see that we get our fish wagging their tails or their fins, so to speak. And so we've got, you know, these little side fins moving, we've got our back tails moving, we're getting some animation happening. Okay, so that's great. Alright, so let's go back to our InParticle 1. And so we have this facing the velocity, but the way it's working with our animation is that things are backwards. Okay, there's a multitude of things that we could do to fix that. I'll show you one easy thing that we can do, and since we're going to be creating some of our own custom attributes anyways, I think that this could be a good fix and a good example for that. So let's come up here to our per particle array attributes. Okay, and we're going to make 3 of our own custom attributes. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to click on add dynamic attributes, and this time we're going to click on general, and we should get a window like this. Okay, so for our first thing, we're going to want to create, you know, our own velocity. So using my can be a good way to kind of just for you to be able to look through here and recognize what your attributes are. So my velocity. Okay, so that's the first thing we've got to do is choose our name. We're going to keep it as keyable. Now, if we think of velocity, right, that's a vector. There's 3 values to that for the vector of our velocity. So we want to make sure that this is set to vector, right? So we want our new velocity to be a vector as well. Okay, we don't want this to be scalar, which would be across the entire particle object, so it would be all the particles together. We want this to be the velocity of each particle. Okay, so my velocity, vector, and per particle. So we just want to make sure we click these little dots next to those. Okay, if I click OK, this will go away. I'm just going to click add so it doesn't. We're going to make a couple other attributes, and we'll talk about those as we create them or put them into effect. But our next one is we want to randomize the start. Okay, so we're going to come up with my start. For per particle, you can see the integer is grayed out. That's okay. We do want integers. But in this situation, it will round, so floats a float value, it's okay. So my start float, and let's keep that as per particle. And then we'll come down here and click add. And let's make one more. We're going to call this my scale. And again, we scale X, Y, and Z, so that's going to be a vector. So we'll change that to vector and per particle. And okay. And now you can see over here in our per particle attributes, we have my velocity, my scale, and my start. So we want to go ahead and start writing some custom or some expressions for our custom attributes. Before we do that, let's go ahead and add a turbulence field to our particles, just so we can get a little more movement. So making sure that we have our particles selected, let's come up to fields and solvers, and let's click that. And let's come down to turbulence. So again, making sure that this is highlighted, come to fields and solvers, and then turbulence. Okay, so let's turn this up. So from 5 to something like 50. I'm going to bring the attenuation down to 25. Sometimes I do like to change the interpolation type. I do feel like we can get a better quality with quadratic. So I'm just going to change that to quadratic. Okay. Alright. So now we have a little bit of turbulence actually moving our fish around. So now I'm going to select and go back to my in particle tab. And we want to write a couple of expressions. So for our first custom attribute, let's affect our velocity. So if I right click on velocity, right, we have a turbulence field, we have some dynamics going on. So we have our choices here: creation, runtime before dynamics, and runtime after. So we want our velocity to update after dynamics. So we're going to click on that. And we could copy this whole thing right here and just bring it down here. Okay. Or we could actually even middle mouse drag that down and we'll just bring it down. But also, I know that Maya will fill in a lot of this stuff for me. So a lot of times I'll just type, my velocity. Okay. And we're just going to have that equal velocity. Now I could do in particle shape 1.velocity and all that sort of stuff, but if we just keep it simple, I think this is just easier for us to type. So my velocity, okay, equals velocity. So right now my velocity is equal to velocity. There's no change. But we want to invert our velocity so that our fish face the other direction. So let's just times this by a -1. And let's click create. So again, up here we have runtime after dynamics. Okay, and we're just doing this little expression right here. So my velocity equals velocity times -1. And then we just want to make sure that we have a semicolon in there. Okay, let's create that. Okay. I'm going to close that. I'm going to come back to my instancer. Okay, so here's my instancer area, right? So I'm going to come back in here, and for aim direction, I'm going to click on this. And if I come down, we'll actually see our new attributes that we've made. So I'm going to change that to my velocity. Now if we play that, the fish, the mouth or the face of the fish will now aim towards the direction that the particle is traveling, so to speak, or the velocity. So that'll make our fish look like they're moving in a direction. And don't worry, we're going to rescale these down. These are pretty big right now, so we'll do that here in a minute. Okay, so talking about that, let's actually come here, and let's right-click on my scale. And I want these to be just generally size different. So I don't want it to update after or before dynamics. I want them to just be born with a randomized scale. So some fish are bigger, some fish are smaller. So right click, and then we'll go to creation expression. And I'm just going to type in my scale equals, and we're going to type in expression. rand, okay, and then we're going to do 0.1, and we're going to do comma 0.5. So what this will return for us is this is going to return for each particle, right? Because this is we made our scale to be a per particle attribute. So for each particle, we're going to get a randomized per particle attribute, my scale, on a per particle basis. Okay, so what that means is for every particle, I'm going to get something between the numbers of 0.1 and 0.5. So it's going to be randomized across all the particle instances. Okay, so I'm going to click Create. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close that. Now if I come down here to our instancer again, we'll see under General Options, we'll see Scale. So I'm going to click on Scale. If I scroll down, I'll see My Scale. So now I'm going to rewind to the beginning, and I'm going to play. And so now you'll see we have fish of varying sizes, and they've been scaled down quite a bit. But as you can see, we've got some fish with this scale, so that guy's a little pretty big, and then we have some fish over here that are, you know, quite a bit smaller. So it kind of randomizes our scale across our fish. Okay, so that's great. But the next problem we have is you can see, like at this point, all the tails are kind of going off to the right a little bit. So no matter what fish you go to, right, his tail's going off to the right a little bit. And so they're all swimming to the same beat, so to speak. And so we want to change and randomize that up as well. Okay, so let's come back here to per particle attributes, and I'm going to go to my start. So we're going to randomize for each particle where they start in that swimming loop. So let's right click on that, and since we're randomizing where they start, that's a creation expression, so they're going to start at different points in the animation. Okay, so we're going to go to creation expression. Okay, and you can see we've got my scale and all that sort of stuff. So we're just going to hit enter, and we're going to add another line. And so I'm just going to say my start is equal to rand, go from 0. I know we have 65 fish, right? And if you don't remember, you can just come over here and look in that group. But I remember we've got 65 fish. So we're going to do rand 0, 65. And we'll put another semicolon. So again, should have something along these lines. Okay, let's go ahead and click Edit. And now, if we rewind and press play, okay. So our fish should all start at different points. Okay, so if we look at this fish, we can see that his tail is off to the right a little bit. Okay, let's go find another fish. So that one's also off to the right. Okay, I know one's in here. Oh, actually they are not, because we have not set the instancer to utilize that start. So actually, this is actually doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing. So if we come over here, okay, to our instancer again, and we scroll down to cycle options, we want to click on cycle start. So we want to click on that, and we want to come down and put my start in there. Okay, so we've created 3 custom attributes. Okay, my scale, we wrote an expression for that, and we hooked it up here in the instancer. We created my velocity, and we hooked it up here in the instancer for aim direction. And then again, for the instancer cycle start object, our third and last attribute that we created, my start, we've got it hooked up there. Okay, so now if we rewind and play that, okay, so this fish, tail's going off to the left, and this fish, tail's going off to the right. This fish left, and even down to this one, you can see this one's more kind of in the middle somewhere. So now we have a lot of customized attributes working for our fish. And so now if we play that, you see we get something along this line. And so our fish are now facing the direction of wherever the particle is traveling, or in other words, the velocity of that particle. Our fish will always face that direction. So anyways, I hope this has been helpful, and yeah.